What I want to describe is a process by which our relationships with our parents create a sexual template that we come into the world with a healthy yin-yang balance, masculine-feminine balance, and that the relationship with our parents, meaning both the yin and yang in our parents, overlays onto our own relationship, the relationship of our own masculine energy with our own feminine energy, and shapes that template such that if the father, for example, is demeaning and hostile towards the spontaneity or the innocence, or is patronizing or condescending towards the presence and beauty of the feminine in both the child and also in the mother, in the wife, that this creates a series of structures that navigate and mediate these two energies in the conscious mind. That in the unconscious mind, in the pre-language brain, there is innate symmetry, innate health in the dance between the masculine and the feminine. But that as a child engages through language with the father and mother, that the template of that dynamic, which traits are valued, which traits are treated, which way by which other persona in the self. For example, there are masculine traits, speaking, initiating, focusing, strategizing, getting to the point, looking at the abstract. There are feminine traits, listening, opening, diffuse awareness, community, emotions, and the way that a culture instills through the parents the cultural biases, the value hierarchy, form a template of value hierarchy, which says that when you speak, you're more valuable than when you listen. I mean, you may be told to listen, but you're also told you have to listen because you're a child, because you have no power, because you don't have knowledge. It's an inferior position, and you are inferior because you are in a feminine state of openness, of ignorance. And this template of messages gets internalized in the child in order to experience love and belonging as a very key aspect in survival and security in the family system. And it is accepted and embodied the way the mother treats the father, but more importantly, the way the feminine energies in both the mother and the father react and engage with the masculine energies in both the mother and the father, which get transferred to the child. Now, in a chauvinistic culture, listening is lower status than talking. Listening is feminine. Following is lower status than leading. Following is feminine. If you take any exchange, any human interaction at all, where there is an exchange of energy, there is a polarity. You cannot communicate without a speaker and a listener. They're equal. You cannot lead without a leader and a follower. A leader that has no follower isn't leading. They're just doing what they're doing. You cannot give without someone receiving. You cannot receive without someone giving. They're equal in value. And one cannot exist without the other. This is where the symmetry comes in. But where the culture overlays, we all know in a chauvinistic culture that to receive is weak, to give is powerful, that to need is weak, that to fulfill someone's need, that's powerful, to speak is powerful, to listen is weak, to think is powerful, to feel is weak, to be emotional is weak. We know that the feminine has lower status on a cultural level that is catering to the chauvinistic bias. But this is not science. And in this dynamic, when the feminine gets invaded, used, dominated, patronized, insulted, minimized in this push of the cultural bias towards masculine traits being pushed onto the more feminine member of the culture. Now, sometimes it's the father who's more feminine, and it is an assertive, domineering mother that makes all of his femininity feel like shit. And the boy gets the same message: my feminine side is shit. Now, once this pattern gets internalized in a default method whereby the masculine in the child relates to the feminine in the child in a way that copies this template, we now have a feminine that feels perhaps helpless, perhaps worthless, with minimal value, that is maybe feels alone and unseen, that feels shame, because every time she expresses herself in either the boy or the girl, the wife or the husband, there is a denigration, an insult, a patronizing. Every time she expresses herself, there's less interest. There is a loss of social status. And once that is internalized, the feminine part of a man will feel small, will feel less valuable, will feel unimportant, less voice, unwanted. Often treated with a certain amount of hostility and hatred, because as a boy, for example, loses status for expressing his feminine side, crying, showing emotion, being sensitive, being kind, as a boy loses status in a sociopathic culture for expressing and catering to the feminine, the boy hates his feminine side, feels ashamed of his feminine side, loathes and resents his feminine side. And his feminine side feels hated, loathed, resented, etc. Now, this pattern of engaging is an energy pattern that is not personal. In other words, once the boy is a practicing, domineering, shaming, blaming, punishing, hating chauvinist towards his own feminine side, which he is embarrassed by, hates, etc., now when he meets the feminine in a woman, he instinctively relates to her feminine side. A woman has a masculine and a feminine side, but instinctively relates to her feminine side with all that scorn, with that judgment, with that hatred, with that kind of domination, with that undervaluing. And in that's where the flow is when the template of the inner masculine dominating and abusing the inner feminine is mirrored on the outside, where the now man finds a woman whom he can dominate and demean and hate, etc., and treat like shit. There will be a sexual flow, because that's what's happening on the energetic template between his inner feminine and his inner masculine. And what a sexual relationship is an externalization of that flow based on that template. So a chauvinistically raised boy is going to feel the most sexual flow when the most sexual energy is flowing. And the most sexual energy is going to be flowing when the internalized abuse is externalized. So, for example, if the boy feels stupid and small and hates his feminine for being gullible. Wait a minute. Then when he sees that gullibility in his partner, he's going to look down on her. And if she has internalized the chauvinism as well, she's going to look up at him, and this is going to mirror the chauvinism. This is where you have the dynamic, for example, of the shrewd, sophisticated, witty sociopath that's constantly putting his female partner down, and she's sexually aroused by it. She's turned on by being put down, because those parts of her, and she's occupying the feminine pole in the relationship, and those parts of her have been dominated and conditioned to be inferior within her upbringing in the same chauvinistic culture. And so there's going to be this head scratching, if there's a conscious adult on both sides, where the man is saying, if it's a marriage, I don't want to be treating you like shit. And she's saying, I don't want to be treated like shit. And yet their sexual flow is activated by the masculine pole in him treating the feminine pole in her like shit, in a way that mirrors the inner template between the parents and the culture and the boy, the masculine and feminine in the boy, and in the woman, in the girl. This is very important to understand, because one of the things it sheds light on is the lack of sexual appetite towards the honorable mother and wife, and the high sexual appetite for the prostitute, who when the sexual energy is released by a template of the masculine dominating and violating and denigrating and shaming the feminine, because that's what happened in the boy and the girl's life. Prostitutes are often abuse survivors, and men that feel most aroused when having sex with a prostitute, it's an act of denigration that creates the flow and arousal. Maybe it's a slapping, that's denigration. Maybe it's a I'll fuck you and do whatever I want with you, and then I won't pay you because you're worthless. It's like, why does that turn a man on? Because it's mirroring the sexual template based on the energetic template, which is the message of the father to the boy's feminine, of, you piece of shit in there, you don't know anything, it's the brain that matters, you don't matter, get out of the way, I don't want to listen to your feelings, you wuss, you pussy, get out of there. I'm going to trick you, I'm going to do this because it's your mind that matters, it's your goals, it's your accomplishments that matter, and your feelings don't matter. And this, of course, hurts, and it's held in place, and so what's happening is a transference of the shame, a transference of the wound to someone else. And when they receive the wound, there is a certain lifting of shame, at least for a while. I felt worthless, I felt undecided, I felt bad, I felt guilty, I didn't want to treat my wife like that, I feel like I'm a bad person if I want to fuck my wife. But if I'm going to some poor, some low social status, dehumanized woman, then I don't have any friction around it. So there's more energy flow. There's no remorse. There's no combat. It's like, well, that's what you do with prostitutes or whatever. It's the conflict comes when you have this idea of honoring and loving your wife, and you have a real friendship together, and then there's this conflict. Well, I don't want to treat you like a slut. I don't want to treat you the way I've been programmed to treat my inner feminine. And unless, which creates this tension. And so typically this is expressed in the stereotypical divide, where the sexual energy is directed to the prostitute or the affair, or the porn, and the loving energy and friendship without sex or with low sexual arousal is directed to the friend, the wife, the partner, the mother. And mothering has another layer to it, because mothering is more sacred than just the wife and mother. There's this real conflict in the brain between the ideal of honoring and taking good care of a wife and mother and the sexual charge of transferring the abuse from the masculine in the male body to the feminine in the female body. Now, of course, the same is true for women. When women respect and appreciate a man because he's an honorable man, but they've been raised in a template where their femininity is shit, is worthless, is and has been dominated, and that's where a lot of their energy is tied up in that pattern. They may respect and appreciate the honorable friend, the man, the husband, but they will be most aroused by the dominant, somewhat sadistic, high adrenaline, semi-violent stranger fucking you. And they, depending on how much of the energy is caught into the chauvinistic template, a woman may not feel a sense of being fully present because it's an act. The energy set template is set towards abuse, and the sense of kindness and friendship is set towards a more balanced and gentle relationship in which neither the female or the male's sexuality is fully released. This is a very difficult and painful crisis in many marriages, and it can be resolved in a couple of different ways. The first thing it can be resolved in is just prioritizing sex over emotions and anything else, and just saying that basically it doesn't matter how we get arousal. If I beat you, if I do this or that or the other, we both want good sex. The marriage needs good sex. And so in the bedroom, in order to reach full sexual release, I'm going to treat you like shit, and I like to be treated like shit. And outside of the bedroom, for propriety and the neighbors and being politically correct, I want to be treated honorably, and you have to do that. And so this is one way of resolving this split. Another way of resolving the split is deep unhappiness and silence, and just going through the motions of periodic sex that meets the standard of a good mother marriage, etc., but does not in any way satisfy either people, and perhaps there's a secret porn or whatever that comes in at some point. Another is the affair, the split, where the sex is with the skank, with the prostitute, and the love and the friendship is with the wife. There's another way of resolving. But the way that's most interesting and profound to resolve this crisis is to deeply go into the feminine in the man, and as a couple learn to honor that feminine, learn to honor the need, learn to honor the terror, learn to bring the hurt, the shame, the rage, the anger of the feminine, the dissociated trauma, to bring it back into the man's body and be honored and be protected and be championed by both the man and the woman. And when that has reached a point where the man uses the masculine inside himself to fight for and protect the feminine inside himself, and now the healing moves into the woman, where the feminine is honored in her and fought for. And when the chauvinism inside that woman discounts, diminishes, abuses, shames, criticizes her feminine, the man fights the masculine, the unhealthy masculine in his wife, and says, no, you don't talk to your feminine parts like that. You don't talk to your innocence that way. That's the part that I love. I am not going to let the ogre in you consume your own child. I'm not going to let the beast in you devour the innocence I'm here to protect. And there's a battle with the unhealthy masculine and a realigning of a healthy boundary, and where the feminine is honored. And now when you have both male and female, husband and wife, same gender marriages, it's just masculine and feminine. Whoever is in the assertive role is in the masculine, the receptive, the feminine, at any given moment in time. But when the assertive, when the organizing, the protecting, the warrior presence in both man and woman will fight for and honor and protect the innocence in both man and woman, a new template gets born that is more healthy, that erodes the chauvinism of the culture. And as that template is born, the full sexual energy of the couple is released into the new template. As the template is born in love, in healthy respect for the listener as well as the speaker, the leader as well as the follower, the focused strategic as well as the diffuse awareness, the joy of presence, the beauty of thought. As these are balanced, and as the masculine comes into alignment as a protector and nurturer and provider for the feminine, to bring out the goddess within the man and the goddess within the woman. Now they align. Now the stereotype of the loving friend, the loving wife, the nurturing mother, protecting the mother, and the full weight of sexual charge releases in synergy. They're not divided. They're brought together, where the deeply nurturing and potent and present sex brings the couple together, deepens the sexuality, deepens the love, which in turn deepens the sexuality, which in turn deepens the love, and it's going back and forth. Now you've healed the split, which is ultimately a cultural split of chauvinism, in which you take half of all human interactions, in which you have a yin and a yang, a masculine and feminine, and you severely undervalue half of humanity in both man and women, and ignore the science, which speaks to the innate equality, the need for both. And I can tell you, as I'm doing this process with my wife, there's no honeymoon phase disappearing. With care, with intimacy, the joy in my heart, the joy in my body, the joy in my mind as they come together are deepening, are growing. And I'm not sure there's a limit to this kind of profound love and sexuality.